come to you this week from the depths of the English summer. We're coming to the end now. When I originally posted that first video on Instagram, I got a lot of other stuff that I'd frankly never tried. Maybe I was aware of it, but for whatever reason, never tried it. This week we're going to look at cotton balls in the drum and sort of what they're doing. They're not really affecting the frequency response of anything. They're just attenuating how the heads are moving. So it's largely to do with the heads as opposed to the resonances of the shell. So if there's any standing waves happening, it's largely going to remain in the drum. From the offset, I was kind of like, I reckon I know what this is going to do. It's going to attenuate the sustain, which it does, and largely acts like muffling without it necessarily sounding like muffling. But how many cotton balls? Now, I had no idea, so I hit upon 12 cotton balls and 24 cotton balls. One of the interesting things, it doesn't really affect the frequency response of the drum, which makes it fairly unique in terms of a muffling technique, because often it will attenuate high frequency. There's summer. Nice, there's a pillbox. But one thing that is a bit of a caveat here, I think I used too many cotton balls. But we can sort of measure the effect of what's going on and what's happening. This is 12 cotton balls. I actually really like that. I think that works really well. I didn't expect that. So, as predicted, it affects the sustain of the drum because they're not allowing those two heads to move. It's just sort of stopping the bottom head, which is probably great if you're in a sort of live situation. I tend to prefer the floor toms to kind of have that like decay kind of thing happening. The next couple of videos, as we kind of come to the end of this first season of this, or whatever this is, are the kind of things to be filed under to be revisited, or, as I'm sure you're aware in creative practice, whenever you're doing something, you do one thing, and rather than sort of answering every question, it tends to pose more questions that you hadn't considered at the beginning, and that is largely what's going on here. So I have a hunch that is largely informed by my experiments. Hang on, I've got to traverse some mud. Success. The cotton balls per 12 are decreasing the sustain by a third. So we had a 3-second sustain on the floor tom with the control. Put in 12, we get 2 seconds. Put in 24, we get 1 second of sustain. So we're losing a third every time. So maybe if we put in 6, we would attenuate half a second. I don't do any live performance stuff anymore, so needing to attenuate the sustain for live performance but maintaining the same frequency response is not something that I really am worried about. I'm largely making samples, but now I know what it does. You know, knowledge is power and all that. It's useful to have in the toolbox. The other one, which we're going to look at next week, was the thing that I've heard so many people talk about. I've heard Jim Keltner talk about it. I've heard a bunch of people talk about it, and that is inverting the floor tom leg. I've got some things that I want to look at. I want to look at different heads. I want to look at muffling, and I'd like to also look at die-cast hoops. I know I did the Gretsch tom. I don't think I did a great job with that one, and I'd like to revisit it. I've got a sneaking suspicion that die-cast hoops are reinforcing the fundamental more than triple flange hoops, which are reinforcing the mid-range. Bold statements, I know, But that might be why when you have a Gretsch, you get that very defined note. Perhaps why it's favoured by jazz players. Don't know. That's my hunch. But, as with all hunches, it's worth investigating. Bear in mind, I have also just spent 4 years chromatically tuning concert toms for an instrument. And all of them had die-cast tubes. So it's interesting stuff. I am going to tackle snare drums at some point. I've got like an absolutely massive list of things to sort of have a look into. Rack toms, I'd like to have a look at. Tom head types, like head types. Kick drums. I've got a 20-inch kick drum that frankly sucks. It's rubbish. Doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't sound good. I'd like to know why. Can I fix it? Is it the bearing edges? Let's do bearing edges. I haven't worked out how to do bearing edges yet. I'd like to do a really definitive look at bearing, like what are bearing edges doing? There's a long list. But thank you for coming along on this journey. It's been great. Isn't it lovely being outside?